Majorie Taylor Greene has been attacking the president of the United States for months now. Finally, over the weekend, the president retaliated. We will get into that. Plus, we'll talk about the affordability crisis, what can be done, why are Democrats continuing to put pressure on Republicans to spend even more on Obamacare? How can we fix it? First, this is your last chance to win my personal lifetime membership. One winner will get all access for the rest of their life. Every benefit we offer now, everything we build next, yours for life. Here's how to enter. Download the free Daily Wire Plus app on iOS or Android and tap follow right under my face. That is your entry. And if you don't want to gamble on winning my personal membership, you can still claim one of the original 10,000 yourself. Fewer than 1,500 remain. Once those are claimed, it is over. Go to dailywire.com/lifetime to get all the details or to secure your place in Daily Wire history right now. Well, over the weekend, the long simmering feud between Representative Majorie Taylor Greene and the President of the United States finally boiled over. So Majorie Taylor Greene has been attempting to run essentially her own knockoff version, her Temu version of MAGA. She's been out retailing it to The View. She's been out retailing it to CNN and MSNBC. She's become the hot new thing in the legacy media. You know, the Jewish space lady. That lady is the hot new thing with regard to legacy media. They now have strange new respect for Majorie Taylor Greene because she has decided that she is going to attack Trump full time. We've been covering it on the show. Well, the president finally noticed, and President Trump put out a statement over the weekend slamming Majorie Taylor Greene quite properly for trying to undermine his actual administration. He said on Truth Social, lightweight Congresswoman Majorie Taylor Brown, green grass turns brown when it begins to rot, betrayed the entire Republican Party when she turned left. This is Saturday morning. This is following Majorie Taylor Greene's repeated attacks on President Trump, particularly over Jeffrey Epstein. Back on Friday, Majorie Taylor Greene suggested on CBS that actually the president of the United States was attempting to protect.
The American people deserve to see transparency from their government. Rich, powerful people should not be protected. That is completely wrong. And it's a message to victims everywhere, victims of human trafficking and children who are trapped in terrible situations, that the government will not protect the predators, that we will work hard to protect the victims.
Now, again, it is ridiculous to suggest the president of the United States is trying to protect predators. And finally, the president of the United States had enough. This line, of course, has been retailed by a wide variety of people who are supposedly allies of President Trump, who have turned on President Trump using the Epstein files as a way of getting at him. We'll get to that in a moment because MTG is part of a broader kind of splinter effort inside MAGA to take control of MAGA because they are angry at the president's policy decisions, and now they've decided to use Epstein as a wedge. And so the president withdrew his support for Majorie Taylor Greene on Truth Social, suggested that he might, in fact, back a primary opponent to Majorie Taylor Greene. Again, she would only be famous for her dumb Facebook posts if it had not been for the president of the United States touting her, treating her as an ally, building her up. And then, of course, she got very angry because she wanted to run for Senate in Georgia. And he pointed out to her she was going to lose by 20 to John Ossoff if she ran for Senate in Georgia. This, of course, ticked her off. So President Trump finally lost it at her on Truth Social. He said, "I'm withdrawing my support and endorsement of Congresswoman Majorie Taylor Greene of the great state of Georgia." He said, "All I see wacky Marjorie do is complain, complain, complain." He said, "It seemed to all begin when I sent her a poll stating she should not run for senator or governor. She was at 12% and didn't have a chance, unless, of course, she had my endorsement, which she wasn't about to get. She has told many people that she is upset that I don't return her phone calls anymore. But with 219 congressmen and women, 53 U.S. senators, 24 cabinet members, almost 200 countries, and an otherwise normal life to lead, I can't take a ranting lunatic's call every day." He then added, "I understand that wonderful conservative people are thinking about primarying Marjorie in her district of Georgia, that they too are fed up with her antics, and if the right person runs, they will have my complete and unyielding support. She has gone far left, even doing The View with their low IQ Republican-hating anchors." So Majorie Taylor Greene was excited about this because she's attempting, again, to run an anti-Trump campaign inside the Republican Party. And so she responded by saying, "President Trump just attacked me and lied about me." Always playing the victim, Majorie Taylor Greene. "I haven't called him at all, but I did send these text messages today. Apparently, this is what sent him over the edge, the Epstein files. And of course, he's coming hard after me to make an example, to scare all the other Republicans before next week's vote to release the Epstein files. It's astonishing, really, how hard he's fighting to stop the Epstein files from coming out, that he actually goes to this level. But really, most Americans wish he would fight this hard to help the forgotten men and women of America who are fed up with foreign wars and foreign causes. are going broke trying to feed their families and are losing hope of ever achieving the American dream. That's what I voted for. I have supported President Trump with too much of my precious time, says Majorie Taylor Greene, too much of my own money, and fought harder for him even when almost all other Republicans turned their back and denounced him. But I don't worship or serve Donald Trump. I worship God. Jesus is my savior, and I serve my district, GA 14, and the American people. I remain the same today as I've always been, and I will continue to pray this administration will be successful because the American people desperately deserve what they voted for. For me, I remain America first and America only. And then she included a couple of texts that she sent to the president about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is not true. What she is saying here, that the president is trying to cover up the Epstein files, the president made absolutely clear, actually, on Sunday, that that was not the case. He put out a truth social in which he said, as I said on Friday night aboard Air Force One to the fake news media, House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide. And it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetrated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party, including our recent victory on the Democrat shutdown. The Department of Justice has already turned over tens of thousands of pages to the public on Epstein, are looking at various Democrat operatives, Bill Clinton, Reid Hoffman, Larry Summers, etc., and their relationship to Epstein. And the House Oversight Committee can have whatever they are legally entitled to. I don't care. All I do care about is that Republicans get back on point, which is the economy, affordability, where we are winning big, our victory on reducing inflation from the highest levels in history to practically nothing, bringing down prices for the American people, delivering historic tax cuts, gaining trillions of dollars of investment into America, a record, the rebuilding of our military, securing our border, deporting criminal illegal aliens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's start talking about the Republican Party's record-setting achievements, said the president on Truth Social, and not fall into the Epstein trap, which is actually a curse on the Democrats and not us. Make America great again. Okay, so again, Majorie Taylor Greene kept saying over and over that it was all about the Epstein files. So here she was over the weekend talking with CNN's Dana Bash.
What do you think happened? What do you think is the reason for this?
Unfortunately, it has all come down to the Epstein files, and that is shocking.
Okay, and then she went on in the same interview to slam President Trump for calling her a traitor, even though, again, she has spent the last several months just beating up on President Trump over and over and over.
The most hurtful thing he said, which is absolutely untrue, is he called me a traitor. And that is so extremely wrong. And those are the types of words used that can radicalize people against me and put my life in danger.
Okay, so again, the new line that's being retailed by people like Majorie Taylor Greene is that criticism of her puts her life in danger. Okay, the president of the United States disagrees. Here's the president responding to that particular idea.
Her life would be at danger because of the rhetoric.
Her life is in danger? Who's that?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, she says.
Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't think her life is in danger. Frankly, I don't think anybody cares about her.
All right, coming up, more on Majorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, Steve Bannon, the collective of people who are attempting to hijack President Trump's MAGA movement. First, in all the time I've been endorsing Pure Talk, my wireless company, I can say I've never seen an offer like this from them before. Listen to this. Unlimited talk, unlimited text, unlimited data with a 30 gig hotspot for just $29.95 a month for life. Friends, this is Pure Talk's top tier plan, normally $65 a month, now through December 7th, just $29.95 a month. You're saving over 50% every month for life. Yes, that's on their crazy fast 5G network. This offer is extremely short-lived. Make the switch today and tell all of your friends. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro for Pure Talk's best unlimited plan for just $29.95 a month for life. And I count on Pure Talk for all my phone calls. They have excellent coverage, lowest price, and they're a company that shares our values. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Keep your phone, keep your number, start saving with unlimited for life for just $29.95 a month. Again, that's puretalk.com/Shapiro to switch to my wireless company, Pure Talk. Taxes and fees not included. Some restrictions apply. See puretalk.com for details. Offer ends 12/7/25. Head on over to puretalk.com/Shapiro and check them out today. Also, we know the costs have been all over the place. Groceries, gas, subscriptions, you name it. So, not a gigantic surprise. We tend to assume everything is more expensive than it actually is. Case in point, 72% of Americans overestimate what life insurance actually costs. Turns out it might be more affordable than you think. Policy Genius makes finding and buying life insurance fast, easy, and surprisingly affordable. So, if something happens to you, your loved ones have a financial safety net. With Policy Genius, real users have gotten 20-year, $2 million policies for just $53 a month. Looking for life insurance can feel overwhelming. Policy Genius makes it surprisingly straightforward. They let you compare quotes from top insurers in just a few clicks so you can find coverage that actually fits your needs and your budget. What really sets them apart is their team of licensed agents who walk you through everything step by step, answering questions, handling paperwork, advocating for you throughout the process. They lay out all your options clearly with coverage amounts, prices, terms right in front of you. No guesswork, just clarity. And since life insurance is such an important part of financial planning, it helps that Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace with thousands of five-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from people who found exactly what they need. Life insurance is super important. That's why we've got a bunch of it in my family. You need to do the same. Head on over to policygenius.com/Shapiro. Compare life insurance quotes from top companies. See how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Shapiro. Okay, so again, this is the idea from Majorie Taylor Greene is that President Trump has basically betrayed MAGA because of Epstein, but also has betrayed MAGA because she has a different definition of MAGA. And this brings us to what's actually going on under the surface here. Majorie Taylor Greene started caring about the Epstein files in a serious way with regard to President Trump about the time that she got angry at President Trump's foreign policy with regard to the Middle East. That seems to be the pattern here. She, Thomas Massie, and a wide variety of commentators seem to get very exercised about President Trump and the Epstein files by claiming that President Trump is in fact enthralled to Israel and that what is happening with the Epstein files, that it's some sort of Mossad agency operation. And what made them mad is that President Trump actually is not anti-Israel the same way that they are. And this is met with mainstream media approval, of course. I mean, listen, Majorie Taylor Greene is making pretty clear what she thinks is happening here. Here she was blaming Israel for Jeffrey Epstein, again, without any evidence. And if there's evidence, present it. I'm all in favor of all Jeffrey Epstein files being released, all of it. The reason I think the president didn't want all of that released is because he was tired of talking about it and because his own FBI had told him there was no there. But I'm all in favor of more transparency on the Epstein files. And anybody who was involved, if in fact there was, as the sort of most ridiculous suppositions, evidence-free suppositions suggest, some sort of intelligence agency operation to underage people in order to blackmail people, which is the theory here. If that's true, whoever engaged in it is evil. Full stop. Bar none. That's just basic morality. But again, the evidence-free nature of this thing is the reason why it is being trafficked by people like Majorie Taylor Greene.
We saw Jeffrey Epstein with ties to Ehud Barak. We saw him making business deals with them, also business deals that involved the Israeli government, and seems to have led into their intel agencies. And I think the right question is to ask is, was Jeffrey Epstein working for Israel?
Okay, so again, she's just putting that out there. No evidence whatsoever because she doesn't like Israel, and also because she has some peculiar views, shall we say, about Jews. She, of course, believes that the United States is enthralled to the Israeli, particularly President Trump. She thinks that President Trump is somehow controlled by the Israelis. Here she was on Steve Bannon's show. Steve Bannon, of course, is on the same side of this argument because he, too, would like to seize control of the MAGA movement. There is a thing that is happening in the Republican Party, an assumption that President Trump is no longer president and no longer the head of MAGA, and now there ought to be a fight over the pieces of MAGA. That basically the ship is rudderless and somebody is going to grab control. Majorie Taylor Greene thinks she is that person. Here she is suggesting that the president of the United States is somehow being manipulated by the Israelis.
6 months in, Steve, and here we are turning back on the campaign promises, and we bombed Iran on behalf of Israel. Yes, it was on behalf of Israel.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a strange supposition, given the fact that, again, Israel was doing the vast majority of the bombing. And it's always funny. All the people who suggest that the president of the United States was being pushed into that by the Israelis, like full on pushed into it, that the Israelis got all their heart's desires from President Trump. Well, no, I assume that the Israeli government would have been fully on board with the idea of toppling the Iranian regime. The president was not. And that's that. And these are the same people who suggested that bombing the Fordo nuclear reactor was somehow going to lead to World War III and full-scale American involvement in Middle East warfare, which, of course, never happened. And again, it's not just Majorie Taylor Greene. It is also Thomas Massie, who takes the same viewpoint. This is the reason why they're focused on Epstein. Okay, let's be clear about this. It is not because of Epstein. The Epstein files have been out there. They've been in the possession. None of these people were screaming bloody murder about the Epstein files when Joe Biden was president of the United States. President Trump comes on the scene, doesn't do the foreign policy they want, and suddenly they start screaming at the top of their lungs about the Epstein files. Thomas Massie, of course, objects to many parts of the Trump agenda, which is why the president would like to primary Thomas Massie as well. Here is Massie also accusing President Trump of some sort of cover-up on Epstein.
You know, I've never said that these files will implicate Donald Trump, and I really don't think that they will. I think he's trying to protect a bunch of rich and powerful friends, billionaires, donors to his campaign, friends in his social circles. And that's my operating theory on why he's trying so hard to keep these files closed.
Again, this is all part of an attempt to turn MAGA into something it isn't. And let's be clear about what MAGA is. MAGA is President Trump, period. End of story. All attempts to reduce MAGA to some ideological form or fashion are bound to fail because President Trump is sui generis. He contains multitudes. That means that many people who voted for President Trump disagree with him on a lot of stuff that he does. You've heard me on this program disagree with the President of the United States quite frequently on matters ranging from foreign policy to domestic policy. The president defines what MAGA is. He always has defined what MAGA is. Now, you can say that there's a new movement afoot to try and cobble together pieces of Trump's coalition moving forward into something different. But to sort of claim the mantle of Trumpism without Trump is a bizarre move and a ridiculous move in its essence. But that's one of the things that's happening here. One of the other people trying to grab control of the Trump movement is, of course, Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, Sloppy Steve, as the president has called him in the past, who has he spent his entire career just glomming onto more powerful people and then using them as essentially a raft in order to jump on a bigger raft. That is Steve Bannon's entire career trajectory. Well, now he has become sort of the most quoted man in media because the media love to use Bannon as a sort of Darth Vader figure hidden behind the scenes and manipulating Republican politics. Now, the media love a good false narrative. In any case, here was Steve Bannon over the weekend, for example, praising Nick Fuentes. Again, the reason this is happening, we should point out, is because there is an attempt to glaze pretty much everybody who is on the anti-Israel, and yes, Fuentes is just an anti-Semite, anti-Semitic side in order to shift policy priorities away from what President Trump is attempting to do.
Alex Jones had a debate with Nick Fuentes and Dinesh D'Souza. And you see right there the laziness, the lack of argument, their attitude that they just own this. Fuentes takes this guy apart brick by brick. It's a full takedown. Because the kid shows up, he's prepped, he's ready. Not only is he on point and he's always on attack, he happens to have something called facts, and he just overwhelms Dinesh. Dinesh goes back, and it shows you this old guard who has nothing.
Again, it's fascinating to watch as all these people make quasi-allies of people like Nick Fuentes, who, again, stumped against the president of the United States in the last election cycle. It really is an amazing thing, and it is part of a broader effort to tear away at President Trump's coalition. That's what this is. To build something else for the future, I assume. It is worth noting here that Steve Bannon, again, being part of the Epstein scandal team, and the sort of, there must be something going on with Jeffrey. Steve Bannon ran ops for Jeffrey Epstein. He had a long-standing relationship with Jeffrey Epstein because, again, Steve Bannon is a leech on other powerful people. That's what he does for a living. According to the BBC, Epstein and Bannon were frequent correspondents. They worked together. He has apparently hours and hours of footage of Jeffrey Epstein, who's trying to make some sort of documentary about Jeffrey Epstein. And all of that has been hidden. So, again, that's the thing that President Trump is fighting back against when he is slapping at Majorie Taylor Greene. This attempt to basically declare his administration a lame duck administration and then grab control of MAGA as a movement and then pretend that the president is somehow betraying MAGA in some fundamental way. That is a unique claim, but it's a claim being made softly and not so softly by a wide variety of figures on the quasi-right, tearing apart the Trump coalition for their own particular purposes. And again, there's a difference between criticizing the things President Trump does. We all do that. He's the president of the United States. And suggesting that he has somehow betrayed the movement he built, which of course is just silly. Already coming up, affordability remains the top of mind issue for the Trump administration. So what should they do next? First, doctors don't usually run Black Friday sales, of course, but the doctors at Brickhouse Nutrition, well, they're different. And right now they've launched their biggest sale of the year, 30% off everything. Here's what you need to know. Head to brickhousesale.com. That's where you'll find their incredible lineup of doctor-formulated health and nutrition products. Let's start with Lean, their number one seller. Some Daily Wire members and producers have been taking lean and seeing life-changing weight loss results. Here's the best part. No injections, no prescriptions, just real, tangible results. And for the ladies, creatine specifically designed for women. Bottom line, this is the best time to stock up. These Black Friday deals are not going to last long. Head on over to BrickHouseSale.com. Save 30%. That's BrickHouseSale.com. One more time. That's BrickHouseSale.com. Lean has been a huge seller for them, again, because people are seeing life-changing weight loss results. It's a huge thing. They have a bunch of products you're going to love. Go check them out right now. Best deal of the year over at BrickHouseSale.com. That's BrickHouseSale.com. Save 30% today. BrickHouseSale.com. Also, you know what I've realized? When your metabolism is actually working the way it should, you feel better, more energy, better sleep, the whole deal. And that's why I started using Lumen. It's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. Honestly, it's pretty simple. You just breathe into it first thing in the morning. It tells you whether your body is burning fat or carbs for fuel. And then it gives you a personalized nutrition plan for the day based on what's actually happening in your body, not some generic diet plan, but recommendations tailored to your real-time metabolic state. What I love is that I use it before and after workouts to see how my body is responding in real time. It's helped me figure out what actually works for my training and recovery, not just what's supposed to work theoretically. It's like having a coach that helps you understand your body's engine and how to fuel it properly, not just for weight management, but for better energy, fitness results, and sleep as well. Instead of guessing or following trends, you're making decisions based on actual data from your own body. Over time, you start to see patterns and really understand what moves the needle for you personally. Lumen is constantly telling me whether my body is consuming carbs, whether it's consuming fat. These are the kinds of things I need to know. Winter is the perfect season to build strength from within. Stay energized, stay resilient, take charge of your metabolism. Go to lumen.me/Shapiro. Get an additional 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Shapiro for 15% off on top of any offers or sales running on their website. Okay, meanwhile, concerns about affordability continue to plague the administration. According to the Wall Street Journal, a proposal to give Americans direct payments of $2,000 or more, an antitrust probe into allegations that meatpacking companies are colluding to drive up beef prices, a new plan to lower tariffs on coffee, fruit, and other popular products. President Trump and his advisors are rushing to try to lower prices for American consumers after voters sent a warning shot to Republicans this month over the high cost of living. Following the recent election, Trump's aides have urged the president to focus on affordability. Now, as I pointed out, for weeks and legitimately my entire career, the only way to achieve affordability truly is to have a robust economy built on private property and free market economics. That is the way that affordability becomes a thing. It is why products that are subject to private property rights and to open competition reduce in price and improve in quality. That is the chief hallmark of a capitalist economy. Any attempt by the government to intervene in the economy directly to quote unquote make things cheaper is likely to achieve precisely the opposite effect. And unwillingness to acknowledge that is likely to lead to pretty poor outcomes. So the president of the United States has put out there that maybe there will be $2,000 tariff checks that come back to people. He gave an update on that Friday night.
I'll be giving back $2,000 or so to middle-income people, low-income people, everybody but the rich.
How soon could Americans see those checks? Will that be in time for Christmas, holiday shopping?
No, not for this year. It'll be next year sometime.
Do you have a time frame?
No,
How many months?
sometime during the year, next year. It's a lot of money, but we've taken in a lot of money from tariffs. The tariffs allow us to give a dividend if we want to do that. Now, we're going to do a dividend, and we're also going to be reducing debt. We have, because of Biden and others, we have $37 trillion in debt.
Okay, so again, he's kind of walking it back a little bit, but let's be real about this. That is not going to solve the price of living problem. That is just helicopter money. Helicopter money increases prices. Now, I've seen the administration passing around a study from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. This was originally reported by Breitbart, and the headline was, Fed study vindicates Trump trade policy. 150 years of evidence shows tariffs lower inflation. Okay, that is not what the study says. That is not what the study says. What the study actually says is that tariffs eventually lower inflation by leading to economic depression. That's what it actually says. What it says is that prices temporarily increase and then demand levels off and then begins to decline as there is job loss and inability to pay for the inflated prices, and then the prices decline. So yes, it turns out higher unemployment and deflation is typically the result of tariff policy, which is bad. That's bad. Like, you will get a temporary price spike, and then, because things are more expensive, fewer people can afford them, and then your demand goes down. And when your demand goes down, your price goes down. But the problem is that people are losing their jobs because they no longer have jobs in industries that require the inputs that tariffs have now made more expensive. And now they can't pay for anything. And you enter a deflationary spiral. That's the actual report. But that's not the report that is being promoted by Breitbart and by the Trump administration, which is that tariffs somehow magically lower prices. That would be, as the kids say, huge if true. But in fact, it is not true. In fact, that is not true. Tariff shocks act through an aggregate demand channel is what the study actually suggests. And what does that mean? What that means is that as demand craters, what you end up with is a deflationary spiral. Tariff hikes raise unemployment, lowers economic activity, and lowers inflation. I'm not sure the president wants to lower economic activity. I'm not sure that's what he's looking for. So the argument that it lowers inflation by, destroying the economy, I don't think that that's the thing that you're looking for. Quote, regardless of our identification approach, we obtain the same result. A tariff hike lowers CPI inflation and raises unemployment. Higher tariffs lead to lower economic activity and lower inflation in the short run. That is not, in fact, against the prediction of standard models. Tariff shocks appear to act as aggregate demand shocks, moving inflation and unemployment in the same directions. I'm not sure why this person labeled this anti sort of traditional economics. No, traditional economics says that a tariff will, in the immediate term, spike prices, and then the demand will go down, and then the prices will go down. So, yes, it turns out that government intervention in the economy leads to unworkability. Meanwhile, Scott Bessent, the Treasury of the Secretary, he says that the costs are going to come down. Here he was explaining on MSNBC's Morning Joe over the weekend.
We inherited an affordability crisis. We have slowed the price increases down, and they are going to continue to slow down, and that real working class wages will go up, and that will address the affordability issue. There are many aspects of affordability that have gotten better under President Trump. They're going to continue to get better. I mean, unbelievably, Bloomberg had an article yesterday that said, mortgage rates aren't down that much. Well, on Inauguration Day, a 30-year mortgage was 7.8%. Yesterday it was 6.22%. That is the single biggest component of buying a new home. And that is a gigantic drop.
Okay, so again, maybe the prices come down. But in order for prices to truly come down, you need less government involvement in the economy. That's what you need. Now, meanwhile, Democrats are involved in the business of blackmail. Economic blackmail. So the basic idea here is that if you won't pay everybody's benefits, we are then going to yell at you for making everybody's life worse. This is the beauty of big government policy. You propose a policy. That policy drives up prices in education, in housing, yes, in food. You subsidize all those things, the prices go up. And then when somebody cuts back and they say, hey, we can't afford all of this, it's actually creating economic unworkability. Then you step in and say, if you won't subsidize it, then you're making people's lives worse. We actually need more government funding. This is the magic opiate that is government spending. Once you get people used to a certain level of government spending, then the effect starts to flatten out, and you need more government spending in order to achieve the same high. This is what's currently happening with food stamps. According to Politico, millions of Americans greeted the end of the government shutdown with relief. But others are learning they could soon lose federal food aid permanently. Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins directed USDA staff during the record-setting 43-day shutdown to continue ushering states toward compliance with Republicans' signature tax and spending law, which is projected to kick millions out of the nation's largest anti-hunger program in the next few months. Those changes, combined with other provisions in the new law, will represent the most significant cuts to the social safety net in decades. And it all comes as low-income families are confronting stagnating wages that aren't keeping up with the skyrocketing cost of living. Now, again, one of the things that contributes to the skyrocketing cost of living are gigantic food subsidies, which is what SNAP is. That's also why wages stagnate, by the way. SNAP, effectively speaking, is a subsidy to low-wage enterprises like, for example, McDonald's. McDonald's can afford to pay people $8, $9 an hour because SNAP is filling in the other side of what the salary would have to be if SNAP didn't exist. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program provides an average of $6 per day for nearly 42 million people, which is, again, an insane number. It has only grown dramatically under Joe Biden. And this is the game that Republicans keep playing, and it's a stupid game. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. They keep playing this dumb game where they think they can somehow outbid Democrats on big government redistributionist programs. Good luck with that. Seriously, good luck with that. At a certain point, people are going to get tired of the diluted drug of government spending from Republicans and instead turn to the full-scale, uncut stuff from Democrats. If the only distinction between Republican policy and Democratic policy is the dollar amount, and the Democrats can outbid you like on The Price is Right, then you're going to lose. You will. And again, this is the Democrats' game. They design programs that are bound to fail unless you have to keep the subsidies up. And then the minute the subsidies go away, they blame you. Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, he's doing this with regard to Obamacare. Of course, the costs of Obamacare have risen dramatically ever since the implementation of Obamacare, one of the worst government programs in existence. But here is Senator Tim Kaine saying that Republicans now have to sign off on larger subsidies or be blamed for the fallout from a failed Democratic program.
It would be political malpractice of the highest order for the House to not take up a bipartisan bill coming out of the Senate. And if they don't take it up, I'll give you a prediction. The November 2026 elections are going to look a whole lot worse for Republicans than the November 2025 elections did, when we just swept Virginia in a historic way and won big races in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Georgia, California, all over the country. Americans will see who's standing with them and who's standing them against them on affordability of health care. That will be clarifying. And I think the fact of that is the window that we have of being able to find a solution.
Okay, so again, this is a form of economic blackmail. So Tim Kaine says there is a path to fix health care. I don't believe you, sir. I don't believe you, because Obamacare was supposed to fix it, and it didn't fix it.
40 days in, the Republicans were saying, we know we need to talk about health care, but we will not engage on health care until government is reopened. Now, it's fair to test somebody's red lines, and we tested them over and over again in October, and they didn't budge from that. So, frankly, I viewed the situation last weekend as we had no path, none, to a health care fix until we reopened government. Now we have a path, not a guarantee, but we at least have a path.
Okay, well, yes, we'll see how your path goes. Meanwhile, Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, he doesn't even want to do that path. Right? He says that the Democrats never should have reopened the government unless they got more government spending from the Republicans.
I thought it was a mistake for Democrats to give up what was real political advantage coming off the elections that could have allowed us to reduce these premiums. In the end, I thought we had a real shot to get a continuing resolution passed that would have lowered prices for people. And I also worry that by capitulating, we have empowered Donald Trump, that Donald Trump is going to act even more brazenly and more lawlessly in the future because of how this vote turned out.
Now, when it comes to Obamacare, there are actually real ways to lower prices in the healthcare industry. There are. One of them is a plan by President Trump that is a good plan, which is to actually just give people money in their health savings accounts and let them use that how they want. That creates competition. It allows them to decide how much healthcare they actually want. Democrats are upset because they say that that will death spiral the ACA, the Obamacare marketplaces, because essentially what the Obamacare marketplaces are forcing young, healthy people to buy comprehensive plans they don't need in order to subsidize older, sicker people with pre-existing conditions. That's what they are. Trump instead would like to return power to the people by allowing them the elective ability to buy healthcare of their choice, and Democrats don't want that. According to the Washington Post, the scenario smacks of deja vu, with lawmakers and experts acknowledging the seemingly interminable battle around the 15-year-old health law. Republicans long struggled to deliver an AC alternative that can pass Congress, and the return of a dynamic from Trump's first term that repeatedly ended in failure. Again, Democrats are always going to have an upper hand here as long as we're talking about subsidized marketplaces. Always. Because they can always outbid everybody. And Americans have an unfortunate habit when it comes to the polls. They're constantly saying they want to cut spending and cut the debt and cut the deficit. And then when asked if they want to spend money from the government on stuff that they want, the answer is always yes. Which is why, according to the Washington Post, about 3/4 of Americans say Congress should extend the enhanced tax credits for people who buy their own insurance through the ACA marketplaces, including half of Republicans. According to the CBO, permanently extending the subsidies would increase the number of insured people by nearly 4 million across the next decade at a cost of $350 billion to taxpayers. Now, the question that we should be asking, of course, is whether your coverage through ACA, particularly if you're young and healthy, improves your health outcome. But nobody actually cares about that. We don't actually talk about the thing we're supposed to be talking about, which is quality of your health care. Do you get the doctor that you want? What is the price of that? The reality is that when it comes to healthcare in the United States, there's constant conversation about how much we spend on healthcare. That is true. But here's a chart of U.S. healthcare spending per capita. That is the y-axis, and the x-axis is U.S. GDP per capita. As you can see, compared to other countries, it's kind of a straight line. There's some outliers, but in fact, there was a divergence. There was a divergence here. And so I asked our sponsors and friends over at Comet, which is a project of Perplexity, when did the U.S.'s healthcare spending per capita begin to exceed competitors based on GDP per capita? According to our sponsors over at Comet, U.S. healthcare spending per capita began to consistently exceed that of comparable wealthy countries, both in absolute terms and as a share of GDP, starting in the 1980s and rapidly accelerating through the 1990s and 2000s, far outpacing GDP per capita growth and competitor nations' spending. So I then asked, how much does Medicare, Medicaid, and Obamacare, how much do these contribute to this dynamic? And Comet answers, Medicare and Medicaid have been major contributors to the growth and high level of U.S. healthcare spending, each accounting for a sizable share of national health expenditure since their inception, while the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, has had a complex effect, dampening spending growth rates in some areas, but increasing total coverage and thus increasing costs. Medicare represented about 21% of total U.S. healthcare spending as of 2023. That is up from 10% in 1970 and 19% in 1990. Medicaid accounts for about 18 to 19% of total national health expenditures. Medicaid expansion since 2014 increased access and reduced some uncompensated care, but also contributed to higher overall spending, especially in states that adopted expansion. So if the costs have risen disproportionately from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s on, might that have to do with the gigantic government expenditures that have eaten up a bigger and bigger portion of our healthcare spending overall? And so the question becomes, as always, how do you generate lower prices? And the answer to generate lower prices is more supply, not higher demand, which is what everyone keeps focusing on. What if we create higher demand with subsidies? Well, then the prices will go up. What if we get more people on health insurance by using government dollars to do it? What do you think is going to happen to the prices? You retained a similar supply and the demand went up. The prices are going to go up. This is basic stuff. It is supply and demand. But politicians, again, always have a stake in trying to outbid the other guy for short-term political gain. Already coming up, Zohran Mamdani is pledging to stop ICE. Man, New York, you bought the ticket, now you take the ride. First, when we started the Daily Wire, it felt like we had to figure everything out with minimal help. Editorial guidelines, studio setup, production schedule, branding. It was overwhelming. New decisions were necessary every day. Finding that one tool that simplifies everything when starting a business becomes a game changer and a lifesaver. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. We even use it for our own Daily Wire shop to make sure things are running smoothly and efficiently so you can get the goods. Well, you might be asking, what if I can't design a website, or I'm worried people haven't heard of my brand? Not a problem. Shopify has you covered from the start with beautiful, ready-to-go templates that match your brand style and help you find your customers through easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. And if you need a hand with everyday tasks, their AI tools created specifically for commerce can help enhance product images, write descriptions, and more. Plus, their award-winning customer support is available 24/7 to share advice if you ever get stuck. Turn those dreams into and give them the best shot at success with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Shapiro. Go to shopify.com/Shapiro. That's shopify.com/Shapiro. Also, what if you could consistently find whatever it is you're looking for right away? We're talking about everything from that important email to the perfect recipe for dinner to your keys when you're already running late. That would save a ton of time. Well, you might never be able to find those things instantly, but if you're hiring, you can find quality candidates right away, time and again, with ZipRecruiter. Today, you can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. Finding the right talent doesn't have to feel like searching for a needle in a haystack. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology cuts through the noise and connects you with top candidates fast. No endless scrolling, no guesswork, just results. Their advanced resume database gives you instant access to contact information for qualified professionals, so you can reach out to the people you actually want to hire without jumping through hoops. It's the kind of efficiency that changes how you think about recruiting, and it's working. ZipRecruiter has earned its spot as the #1 rated hiring site on G2, trusted by businesses that need to build great teams without wasting time on platforms that overcomplicate the process. You want to know right away how many qualified candidates are in your area? Look no further than ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter will get a quality candidate within the very first day. And right now, you can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. Again, that's ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Joining us on the line to discuss is Avik Roy. He's co-founder and chairman of the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity. Avik, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Ben, always a pleasure.
So there's a lot of talk about the word affordability, but nobody actually wants to discuss what actually needs to happen in order to achieve affordability. That is particularly true in the realm of healthcare, where Democrats seem to have played a wonderful trick on the American people. They said they were going to solve the affordability crisis in healthcare with Obamacare. And then it turns out that the prices of health insurance skyrocketed. People don't have the coverage that they want. And now they're saying that if they don't get further subsidies, then obviously affordability will be very, very difficult. So it's always this constant spiraling blackmail game where if you don't give them more money, then they say there's an affordability problem. And then you give them more money, it fails. And then they require more money in order to make that more money work. So how do we actually change, obviously, the healthcare system in the United States, a mixed healthcare system? It's got its good aspects and its bad aspects. I want to start with, before we get to what needs to change, I want to ask you, there's a lot of talk about how much Americans spend on healthcare. Do we actually spend a wildly disproportionate amount per household on healthcare compared to, say, other developed countries?
The answer is yes. We spend way more on healthcare. Not only do we spend way more on healthcare than other industrialized countries, but we actually subsidize healthcare more per capita than any other country in the world. So when you hear people on the left say, well, the problem with healthcare is we don't subsidize it enough, actually the subsidies per capita, the government subsidies of healthcare in the US, are way higher than any other industrialized nation.
So the answer that'll be given by members of the left is, well, that's just because of the evil insurance companies and their profit motive. So how do we actually bring down the prices?
Well, that's a big topic, and we don't have as much time for that broader topic of healthcare costs. But the one thing I'll say, the one core element of this, Ben, that your listeners can appreciate, the one thing we did that is the original sin of why American healthcare is more expensive than every other country in the world is what we did in World War II and its aftermath. So I think you know the story, Ben, which is that we imposed wage and price controls in World War II because we're worried that with all the men off to war, there wouldn't be a labor force and there would be spiraling wages, and that would lead to inflation. That would be a bad thing. So the Roosevelt administration literally passed a schedule where if you were a mechanic, you could make this much an hour. If you were a barber, you could make that much an hour. But the loophole was employers figured out they could offer health insurance to people, and that would evade the wage controls. And then after the war was over, the wage controls were lifted, but the Eisenhower administration decided that they were going to exempt from taxation the value of your health insurance. So if you made $100 in wages, that you pay income taxes on, Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes, state and local taxes. But $100 in health insurance would have no taxes. So what happened? All of a sudden, all these things that never used to be categorized as covered by health insurance got covered by health insurance. And you as a worker didn't know how much you were paying for your health insurance because your employer bought it for you. In theory, of course, it's still being taken out of your paycheck. But that system, that 80-year-old system of your employer being the middleman of buying your health insurance instead of you buying it for yourself, that was the fundamental distortion that has led to every other problem in the healthcare system.
So when we look at the healthcare system now, President Trump has been suggesting something that has been suggested by Republicans probably as long as I've been alive, which is the better use of health savings accounts instead of sending money directly to insurance companies via your employer. Instead, what we really should be doing is allowing particularly younger people to decide on where they want to spend their money. How would that impact healthcare in the United States?
Frankly, not much, because unless you reform the insurance system alongside with health savings accounts can't really work. So let's say every American had $2,000 in a health savings account. That's great for your mammograms and your annual checkups and your lab tests. But if you get hit by a bus or you have a stroke or you have a $100,000 hospital bill for whatever reason, that $2,000 health savings account is not going to go very far. So you still need something like insurance. And the big problem, the thing that Obamacare did that was the most damaging of all the things Obamacare did, was it created a one-size-fits-all federal regulatory architecture for insurance that people buy on their own. Remember, I mentioned that most people get insurance through their employer. A lot of people through Medicare and Medicaid get insurance through the government. But there's about 30 million people or so, and 50 million in theory, who could buy insurance individually, just like they buy car insurance or homeowners insurance or what have you. That's the spine, the foundation of a free market healthcare system, is people buying their own insurance. And that requires you to deregulate Obamacare. And the trick there is you cannot deregulate Obamacare without 60 votes in the Senate, because the regulatory aspects of Obamacare require a filibuster-proof majority to reform. And so this is a core of why my strategy has differed from what a lot of other people are talking about when it comes to how should we deal with the current situation.
So what is your strategy for dealing with the current situation, given all the concerns about affordability?
So we have these, as you mentioned, we have these Biden-era enhanced subsidies. Though there were subsidies originally in the so-called Affordable Care Act that were enacted. It was passed in 2010, but they didn't go into effect until 2014. And those have been trucking along and defraying the cost for some people of the high premiums in Obamacare. But during COVID, the Biden administration with the Democratic Congress passed these enhanced subsidies that basically allowed a lot of wealthy people to be eligible for Obamacare and also decrease the cost sharing or the amount of premiums that lower income people had to pay. Those that was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to expire in 2023. Then the Democrats extended it to 2025. And so it's expiring at the end of the year. And Democrats are trying to blame Republicans if they expire. It was Democrats who passed the law that expires. It's their fault. If they wanted to pass something permanent, they could have done it when they were in charge. But here's the thing. So you hear a lot of Republicans say, well, let's just let the subsidies expire. What's the big deal? It's not our fault. And I understand a sentiment and I sympathize with it a lot. But here's the strategic point that I'm trying to make is that if we want to reform these regulations in Obamacare, we need 60 votes in the Senate. In the current Senate, that means we need all the Republicans, 52, and we need 8 Democrats. So can we get 8 Democrats to help us reform some of the regulations in Obamacare? And I pitched an idea in the Washington Post about a month ago where we trade a temporary extension / phase out 1 to 2 years of those enhanced subsidies in exchange for that 60 vote form of deregulation of Obamacare. Because the deregulation would be permanent, because to reenact it, you'd have to get 60 votes again to change it again. And it would be a temporary win for the Democrats on the subsidy side. So let's do that. And in that way, we can actually make the individual market for health insurance more affordable. And if you want a free market healthcare system over the long term, that again has to be the foundation. If we can't help people buy insurance on their own, we're never going to have a free market system for everybody.
And I think that is the biggest point here is that our system is a mess. It is a mixture of nationalized healthcare through Medicare and Medicaid and heavily subsidized healthcare through Obamacare, and then actual private health insurance, which has been made very difficult to actually obtain, employer-based health insurance. It is indeed a complete mess. And basically the only way to unwind it is going to have to be piecemeal, piece by piece, with hard deregulatory work that is unrewarding in the short term and perhaps more rewarding in the long term. Avik Roy, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben.
Meanwhile, Zohran Mamdani is pledging over in New York that he will not work with ICE officials. According to the New York Post, if ICE or other immigration agents go out of bounds, the place to fight them is the courts and not the streets. And New York politicians from Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani on down are courting chaos if they play the issue otherwise. This is according to the Post editorial board. Consider City Councilman Sean Abreu's smear Wednesday posting an inflammatory video he claimed showed Homeland Security officers pulling a migrant out of an SUV in Washington Heights without due process. Abreu blasted the arrest as, quote, deeply disturbing and part of a despicable pattern of intimidation, huffing that agencies, quote, carrying out President Trump's agenda of detaining people without due process have no place in our city. In actuality, the person who was being arrested was a person who hopped the border in 2021 and had gotten due process and had a removal order, actually. Mamdani continues to promise to resist removals of even violent criminal illegal immigrants, calling ICE a rogue agency and vowing to stop it from enforcing the law with deportations. We'll see how that works out for him. Meanwhile, ICE continues cracking down. According to Axios, Homeland Security is launching its operations in Charlotte and now has New Orleans in its sights. Operation Midway Blitz, which targeted undocumented immigrants in the Chicago area, resulted in 3,000 arrests, according to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. And now, apparently, they're going to escalate in places like Charlotte and also New Orleans. Here is the Border Patrol Chief, Mike Banks, talking about the effect of all of this.
Our recruitment numbers are through the roof, Griff, and I tell you this, imagine that. When you have an administration like President Trump and Secretary Noem that actually support the men and women of U.S. Border Patrol, allow us to go out there and do our work. People want to be a part of this mission. This is an important mission. Border security is national security, and our recruitment numbers are through the roof. We've put over 1,000 new agents on the ground this year, have 1,000 at the academy, and plan on tripling that next year.
Again, the president's immigration policy, particularly on the southern border, has been wildly successful in terms of internal deportations. ICE has been doing good work, but that was always going to be more dicey. They have been largely targeting criminal illegal immigrants, meaning illegal immigrants who are here and then have committed other crimes other than the illegal immigration. And, all the talk about mass deportation, millions and millions of people being deported from the interior of the United States, that is very unlikely to happen, but you are getting some level of what Mitt Romney used to call self-deportation, people who believe that they will be arrested and thus are going back to their home countries. Meanwhile, Hunter Biden is back and he's better than ever. Yeah, you missed him, didn't you? Hunter, Joe Biden's son. Well, he's back to compare President Trump to Adolf Hitler because we haven't had enough of this.
It is the same thing that we sat as students of history and wondered, like I think everybody does, is how did the German people allow that to happen? How did they allow it to happen? Here's how it happens. And I'm not saying that there is a Holocaust. And by the way, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is Hitler, because Hitler had an ideology, okay? And he had a grand plan. Donald Trump is purely corrupt.
So, yeah, so Trump is actually worse than Hitler because Hitler had an ideology. Good stuff there from Hunter Biden. That's just great. Meanwhile, Michelle Obama is still on her whining tour. She says that she's never going to run for president because America isn't ready for a woman. Yeah, that must be it. I mean, it must be that America is sexist, not that Hillary Clinton was a really, really bad candidate and that so was Kamala Harris.
Do you think that impacts the room that we've made for a woman to be president?
Well, as we saw in this past election, sadly, we ain't ready. That's why I'm like, don't even look at me about running, because you all are lying. You're not ready for a woman. You are not. So don't waste my time. We got a lot of growing up to do. And there's still, sadly, a lot of men who do not feel like they can be led by a woman, and we saw it.
Okay, so, yeah, it must be the sexism. Again, the Democratic whining, I'm not sure this is a strategy for them, but we'll see how it works out. Michelle Obama also had comments about black women's hair. Now, I understand this is a frequent complaint. This has been a thing for a very long time. The talk about how black women are expected to straighten their hair as opposed to wearing their hair naturally when they go into their jobs. This may have been an issue 30 years ago. I would love to see some stats on whether it is an issue today. I have serious doubts.
Let me explain something to white people. Our hair comes out of our head naturally in a curly pattern. So when we're straightening it to follow your beauty standards, we are trapped by the straightness. That's why so many of us can't swim and we run away from the water. People won't go to the gym because we're trying to keep our hair straight for y'all. Why do we need an act of law to tell white folks to get out of our hair?
I mean, number one, you don't. Number two, you're sitting there with straight hair. I feel like if Michelle Obama wanted to make a statement, she probably should not do that. Correct? I mean, if that's submission to white people, then Michelle Obama's pretty powerful and she's on a stage filled with people who love her. She could wear her hair however she damn well chooses. I assume she prefers her hair that way, which is why she's wearing it that way, unless there is some unseen white hand forcing her to straighten her hair. Michelle Obama running around the country complaining, I mean, truly, our country has a lot of complainers. I will say that. A lot of people complain about this country a lot who really should not be complaining about this amazing place to live. Okay, meanwhile, new details emerging in the case of Thomas Crooks. He, of course, is the would-be assassin against President Trump who ended up actually murdering somebody who is behind him. He murdered Corey Comparatori, as you recall, the firefighter, volunteer firefighter, and seriously wounded a couple of other people who were sitting in the bleachers behind Trump at that Butler, Pennsylvania rally. According to Miranda Devine, writing for the New York Post, there are now new details emerging regarding the background of the shooter. Well, thanks to an enterprising source who uncovered Crooks' hidden digital footprint, we can see that actually the FBI misled Congress by omission because they left out an entire section of Crooks' online interactions from January to August 2020 when he did an ideological backflip and went from a rabidly pro-Trump to rabidly anti-Trump and then went dark, never seeming to post again. Among the 17 accounts uncovered by our source were ones on YouTube, Snapchat, Venmo, Zelle, GroupMe, Discord, Google Play, Quizlet, Chess.com, and Quora. Apparently, in his sort of original iteration, He loved Trump. He was violent in his rhetoric. He wrote on December 12th, 2019, "Murder the Democrats," in all caps. But apparently, in early 2020, he flipped and became incredibly critical of President Trump. The first time he criticized Trump was on January 23rd, 2020, when he commented on a video of law professor Jonathan Turley talking about Trump's first impeachment. Crooks wrote, "Keep in mind, the only reason we may know about any of this is because of Trump's stupidity." And then he started calling Trump's supporters a cult and called Trump a racist. So the question is, what exactly changed? Well, fascinatingly, one of the aspects of Crooks's background that is coming out here in Miranda Devine's reporting, Crooks appears to have been interested in furries and exploring gender identity. He described himself with the pronouns they, them on the platform DeviantArt, which is one of the biggest online hubs for furry art and the furry community. Two accounts linked to Crooks's primary email were found on DeviantArt under usernames with Epic Microwave and The Epic Microwave. The account suggests he had an obsession with scantily clad cartoon characters sporting muscle-bound male bodies and female heads. So could this be another situation like the alleged murderer of Charlie Kirk? Clearly could be. In other information that we now have, apparently one of the people Crooks interacted with online was a Willie Tepes, a member of a Norwegian neo-Nazi group, the Nordic Resistance Movement, which has since been designated a terrorist organization by the State Department. Apparently, he encouraged violence and Crooks' extremism using the Maoist phrase, "Political power comes from the barrel of a gun." So the question as to what the FBI knew and when they knew it, that remains out there. The FBI obviously should reveal as much information as humanly possible about all of this. My understanding is that the president has been reticent to release this because, kind of like the Epstein files, the president just doesn't like distracting stories. But I think what the president should get at this point is that there is a Streisand effect to everything online. That if you say, I don't want it out there, there is likely to now be significantly more coverage than if you had never said anything about it at all. Apparently, Secret Service told Susan Crabtree, an investigative reporter for Real Clear Politics, that Crooks was not a person of record at the U.S. Secret Service in 2020 and was not known until Butler. So, again, it is worthwhile just revealing all the files, seriously, at this point. I mean, the would-be shooter is dead. He was killed on site by Secret Service. And so continuing to obscure information, I think, serves zero purpose at this point, if it ever did. Alrighty, coming up, we'll get into the latest in Venezuela. Will the United States be pursuing further on-land strikes in Venezuela? Plus, Nicolas Maduro reduced to singing John Lennon in order to dissuade President Trump. First, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.